Hello and welcome to my presentation of my proposed project Top Dog Football Edition. In this presentation, I will be discussing a brief overview of the game, providing a high concept in addition to the main mechanics and goals, thus providing theories as to why they are being used and how they will function. I will then give a walkthrough of how the game works from beginning to end via blueprints, detailing certain USPs and mechanics. I will subsequently focus on the design pillars and lastly provide a week-by-week schedule of how the prototype of the game will be completed. This game is a football simulation game in which you can actively play using RPG elements or leave it playing in the background through its idle functionality. The RPG elements of the games come from playing as the owner of a football club and must earn as much money as you can in order to work your way up in the world of football business. The goal is to be the owner of a Premier League club and making them the wealthiest team in the world, a destination for top players and a successful force in the world of football. You can play the game actively or leave it running in the background, still gaining money and financial power for your club. However, although at some points the game might notify the player to come back in order to improve stats or buy players for the manager. When it comes to improving your club, in order to make the most revenue possible, you must make smart choices. For example, making sure you buy players the manager wants and not players that are cheap or free. A problem I've encountered upon iteration of the initial game idea was finding a way to introduce the personality of the manager's staff and the fans. I wanted to include a morale system, however I felt like this was too tedious and not exactly exhilarating for the players. I therefore decided to do something that linked in with the concept of decision making, therefore adding an approval system. This system will be similar to Dragon Age Origins, where instead of it being a simple system in which you are good or bad, it is a system in which you will gain approval not by fans, managers and players, each providing different outcomes. According to Paul Sudbury, when discussing the theory of morality in games, he states that the system is particularly interesting because it allows players to distance themselves from choosing to play as a good or evil character, and instead open up decision making. Decision making is a key concept in my game and will be discussed further across the presentation. Lastly, the player can own more than one club and can transfer young players to smaller clubs in order to improve their stats quicker and come back and help your main team. Owning a smaller club can also help generate a lot more revenue. When designing the simulation of the game, I've decided to create the game following Jeremiah McCall's guide in designing a simulation game. He identifies 5 key steps in order to make the game enjoyable and fun rather than tedious and repetitive. Firstly, I have to identify the system for the simulation, which is being a football club owner earning money. And the process of doing this is by earning money at a specific rate, depending on how well your club is doing during the football season. Your role is making sure the club runs successfully, solving problems and providing financial backing for the manager and staff. With that in mind, the goal is to be the wealthiest club owner in football. The tools you have in order to solve problems is making smart choices whenever a problem arises. For example, if the manager wants a player, if a player misbehaves, if the team needs a new nutritionist or training facilities, or if the club needs new scouts, as well as providing money in order to achieve this. This all helps towards your goal as you will be making money through football matches and sponsorship deals, taking note that sponsors and fans will only pay if your team does well. The maths behind my game is extremely important, not only because it's vital for the game to work and function appropriately, but it also helps in designing a game that is fun if done right. Players want to be able to feel like they are progressing and earning money. However, they also don't want to feel like they are earning more money than they should be and completing the game with ease, as this can nullify the mechanic of choice and decision making. For example, if in my game you had a choice of buying a training facility or a scout, if you had too much money, you'd buy both and simply complete the game easily. Whereas if you didn't have enough money for both, you'd have to choose which option you'd want to go for, and that completely changes the way the game plays. A way of going around this is making things more expensive as the game progresses at an exponential rate, whilst at the same time you earn money at a steady and constant rate. This concept is used in many clicker games such as Adventure Capitalist and Clicker Heroes in order to maintain the balance. Moving on to how this maths works, we're going to use the example of Clicker Heroes. They use a formula known as price equals base cost times multiplied to the power of number owned. A simpler way of explaining this is using my example of the game. We wanted to determine the price of the next training upgrade after purchasing the first costing £500,000. So to determine the price, you take the base cost, which is 500,000, times a multiplier. Some games use higher multipliers. In my case, I want to use 1.02. And then you times it by the number owned. For example, if you've owned 2 and you want to buy your third one, you'd put 2, and the total will give you 530,604. That is the price for the third training upgrade in your game. When it comes to playing the actual match in the game, the player will have the option to watch the whole game as it progresses, or just skip in the match and not have to watch the whole game play out. This feature is dedicated for those who want to play the game at a faster pace. As well as an important aspect of this feature is also being able to allow the player to choose between skipping the match or watching the whole game, catering to both types of players, those who want more of a slow-paced game or those who just want a faster pace. The player will not be able to see the actual players, however, kicking the ball. However, the screen will look similar to the game Football Chairman, where you'll be able to just see your team's lineup and if they score any goals or not. Another obstacle I had to overcome when developing my game was figuring out a way of how to make the game work in terms of matches. When you want to play a match against another team, how does the computer know which team should win? Simple. After doing a lot of research, I discovered that the most efficient way to do so is by creating a database on Excel with all the team's stats and all the stats for other teams. After calculating the stats, the team that has the best overall rating should win the game. If the overall rating is 2 plus or minus from the other teams, the game will be determined by a random generator. In other words, a 50-50 chance of either team winning. I would have to then implement all this data via codes in order to make this work. I will now explain a brief walkthrough of the game. Once the player enters, they have the option to create and customize their avatar, giving them a name and nationality. This nationality which will also affect the cost of buying players from a certain country, and your avatar's face. This all adds to the feel of playing an RPG. To further emphasize this feeling, I wanted to create a story for the player, so we move on to a cutscene explaining to the player that he has just won the lottery, and as a lifetime fan of football, you would like to invest in a football club, in which you are given the option to choose between 3 clubs, all with a distinct philosophy. The player must choose a club with a philosophy of football they feel more attached to and would like their club to implement on the field. Fans are also happy with the philosophy and expect it not to be changed during his tenure. This aspect of the game can be considered as a section of an RPG when the player chooses their class. In games such as World of Warcraft, the player can choose between a mage or a paladin. This brings me to the concept known as fulfilling the role. Darren Jameson believes that the purpose of a class is to allow the player to play the game in a way that they truly enjoy. He believed that not everyone enjoyed playing as a mage or as a warrior, and you want to give the player the choice of being able to pick what they want to do. And I believe I have done this by giving the player the choice between the different styles of play each club has. Moving on, the player can then begin forming the club by choosing a manager that is best suited for the club. You also then have to go and choose your sponsors, which will be vital in adding funds to your club. You have kit sponsors that give weekly bonuses, stadium sponsors that give you year bonus, and matchday sponsors that give you money after every game, home or away. Our final step before the player can experience the main game is setting prices, such as the matchday tickets. The higher the cost, the more profit, but less likely fans will be happy. This is ideal if the player wants to make money quick in order to buy better players quicker at the cost of the fans being upset, or by making the prices low, generating less income but keeping fans on his side and working towards a long-term future for players that want to stick at this club and not sell the club in the future. This type of mechanic introduces the player into the concept of decision making based on how they would like to play. After all this is complete, the player will then be transferred into a main page. The game will guide the player to the email to open a message from an advisor who will guide the player throughout the game. And lastly, advising the player that they can also run the club whilst you're not playing actively. This shows and indicates to the player that the game is also idle and that it can run in the background without their involvement. Other emails the player might get would be from the clubs interested in deals, signings or loans of other footballers, managers asking for certain things such as players they want, upgrades to the training they need, or if a certain player should be fined for misbehaving or missing training. If the player decides to sack one of the footballers after just one offence, it might hinder the chances of buying players as they are too scared of your strictness. However, it enforces players to keep playing at their very best, producing good results. Again, this is key to the decision making on how you want this club to run and your choices. Underneath, you will see the 3 options in which the player can use for when the game requires a player to be active. Here they can choose a financial menu where they can edit prices by stadium upgrades or stadiums, sponsor deals and hire staff members. In training, they can upgrade player stats by improving the facility and nutrition, as well as hiring specific coaches. And lastly, the transfer menu where the player can buy, sell or loan players and look at scouted players the manager wants. Lastly, at the bottom, you'll see the button that says next game, which will skip the week and go to the next game. When the game is running in the background, it will immediately stop once it's match day after 7 days and will notify the player that he needs to come back and play the game in order to carry on. When talking about the design pillars, I believe our focus is the RPG element, along with the idea of being able to play the game actively or leave it idle running in the background. This shows the game flexibility for the audience, increasing its target market. The other two factors of design are also very unique selling points, as one is the decision making one must undertake throughout the entire game. Comparing my game to other similar games such as Football Tycoon, you don't entirely have the same decision making as you do in mine. And lastly, being able to buy more than one club or selling the club you have and buying a bigger one. This mechanic is similar to other games, as you can also buy other clubs and sell the club you are running. What differentiates my game to the others is being able to own multiple clubs, having more than one. Other games do not allow this. This helps you increase your revenue in the background and also help develop younger players. Lastly, I have created a week-by-week schedule for when I make a prototype version of my game. In the first week, I will create a currency system in which you gain money at a certain rate. And when something activates, the rate increases. Then allow the player to use the currency to purchase and sell within the game. I will then create a basic database on Excel incorporating the stats of a squad in which the stats can be improved based on training upgrades. This data can be used in order to simulate free matches in which you would always lose unless you buy the upgrades. Then transfer this data into Unity. I will then implement an idle system in which you gain currency while the application is running in the background or off. I will test this on a separate build of the game, and then I'll also add the ability to buy other clubs as the final objective of the prototype game. I will then implement the approval system, which is affected depending on whether you win or lose the simulated games, and when you edit the price of the match day tickets, another feature which will be added during this week. I will then integrate the RPG element to the game, such as being able to edit your name, choose an avatar, your nationality, and then I will add more specific UI elements and extra secondary features like a main menu and the cutscenes with instructions to help guide the player during this prototype. I will then use the following weeks to play test and gain feedback from different audiences, such as players who are similar to the genre and are also fellow game designers, and people who have no idea of game design and are just simply there to play the game. I will then use the last 2 weeks to focus on bug fixes.